Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophet Speak. Today we are continuing our study of the book of Daniel, the book of Daniel, and we are doing chapter 4a, the first half of chapter 4. Chapter 3, Daniel didn't appear in. That was the story of Daniel's three friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, and their refusal to bow to Nebuchadnezzar's golden statue, and then the miracle that ensued when they were saved from the fiery furnace. Chapter 4 really begins with the last three verses of chapter 3. Most scholars agree that verses 31, 32, and 33 of chapter 3 really should be verses 1, 2, and 3 of chapter 4. So I'm going to start reading from chapter 3, verse 31, but this is the beginning of chapter 4. Nebuchadnezzar at this point sends a letter to all of his people, all of his dominion, and this is the content of the letter that he writes. I would like to point out that Nebuchadnezzar has so far, in two separate stories. The first one was the story of Daniel revealing to him his dream about the gold, about the huge statue, and revealing to him both the dream and its meaning. And then the second story of Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah refusing to bow down and then getting saved from the fiery furnace. In both cases, Nebuchadnezzar acknowledge the greatness of God. But it's important, and I made note of this before, but this is crucial to understanding chapter 4. What Nebuchadnezzar recognized was that the God of the Judeans, the God that Daniel worshipped, was the most powerful, was the strongest, was forever, the greatest, was able to accomplish wonders that no other God could accomplish. But he would still remain a polytheist. He still believed in the powers of the other gods too. It's just that they weren't as big or as great as the one of Daniel. So he was, I guess, in a sense you could say he was getting closer to understanding the truth, but he was still far from it. And it's important to understand that as we read through this chapter. So here's the letter that Nebuchadnezzar writes, chapter 3, verse 31, which really should be chapter 4, verse 1. As follows: Nebuchadnezzar Malka, the L'chol Hamamaya, Umaya V'lishanaya. Nebuchadnezzar, the king of all the nations, all of the ethnic groups, and all of the language groups. The Dairin B'chol Arash Lamchon Yiskei, that live in the entire land of my dominion, may you all have peace. Osaya V'timhaya Di'avadimi, Eloha Ilaha. The great signs and great wonders that the great and most high God has done for me. Shefar kodomai l'hachvaya. I am happy, I am pleased to reveal all of these things to you. Many of these terms you may recognize that make their way into the liturgy in many places, in some of the famous Sabbath songs and in some of the verses from Psalms. It is pleasing to me to say this praise. What great wonders is Nebuchadnezzar talking about? Presumably the great wonder of his great kingdom, that he's so powerful and so wealthy and so on. And all of this, he's saying, is from the God who is the greatest of all the gods. Asohi K'marav Ravin, how his signs are so great and wonderful. V'timhoi Kamat Takifim, and his wonders are so strong and powerful. Malchutei Malchut Olam, his kingdom is a kingdom that lasts forever. This was taken straight out of the dream interpretation of chapter 2, where Daniel demonstrated to him that the only kingdom that will last forever is the kingdom of God. V'sholtoneim dar dar, and his rulership is over each generation. Again, this comes straight out of Daniel's interpretation in verse 2, and in chapter 2, where Daniel told him that every generation, one nation rises, one nation falls, one nation rises, one nation falls, and it's all in the hands of God. So Anon Nebuchadnezzar, this is now chapter 4, verse 1. I, Nebuchadnezzar, Shalei Haveit Bebesi, I was living peacefully in my house, Viranan Behechli, and doing just fine in my palace. Everything was happy and fine and good. And whenever we find someone start a conversation, everything was doing well, it means it didn't keep on going that way. Something was about to shake up his peace. And what was this? Again, another dream. Chalim chazes. I saw a dream, vidachalinani, and it frightened me very much. Viharhorin al mishkevi, and the thoughts that I had on my bed, v'chazvei reishi, and the visions that I had seen in my mind, yivahalunani, they made me very upset and scared. So again, he has another dream. So over here, Nebuchadnezzar had thought that he found peace when he finally found the truth in the sense of who the most powerful God is. He already had a little bit of peace. But then that peace went away because he had this dream. He was afraid because of what he saw in this dream. And umini sim te'em, so I gave an order. I put out a proclamation, lahanallah, l'kadamai, that everyone should gather in front of me, l'chol hakimei Bavel, all of the wise men of Babylon, tifeshar chelmo yehodunani, that they should come and tell me the meaning of this dream. Now this time, it's the meaning of the dream. If you remember in chapter 2, it was the dream itself that he didn't remember. And he got all upset at his necromancers and magicians that couldn't tell him what his dream was. This time, he knows what the dream is, and he's going to tell us what the dream is, and all he wants from his magicians and necromancers, etc., and sorcerers is the explanation of the dream. The Beidayin, so therefore at this time, Olin Chartumaya, Oshvaya, Kastoe, Vigazoraya, V'chalmar Anakonomion. All of these, it lists off all different kinds of various types of magicians and diviners and sorcerers and so on. And I told them my dream, Ufishrei lo mahod in li, but they did not tell me its meaning. Now when we see what the dream is later, most likely there were many among this group that did understand the meaning of the dream, because it's pretty obvious what the basics of the dream is, at least, but no one was willing to tell him the answer. V'yad ocharon ol kodamai Daniel, but after all of the others tried, then Daniel came in front of me to give me the interpretation. The Shmei Belshazzar, the Daniel whose Babylonian name is Belshazzar. Kishum Elohi, that name is like the name of my God. V'diruach Elohim Kadishin Bey, and that within Daniel he has the spirit of the holy gods within him. V'chelma kadamoi amres, and then I told him my dream. For whatever reason, he wasn't in the first group. Maybe he tried the little guys first, and then he tried their boss, because remember, Daniel was in charge of all of the wise men and magicians, etc. But there's a couple things here that we see right away from verse 5. Number one, Nebuchadnezzar still calls, he's calling Daniel Belshazzar, and he says, like the name of my God, Baal. Baal is the chief head god of Babylon. That's where the name Babylon comes from. Baal is Babel. Baal is the name of the head of the pantheon of the Babylonian gods. So, and he gave him his name Belshazzar, which has the name of Baal in it. Baal is presumably a version of the famous god called Baal, who was the Canaanite god, who was the unfortunate was the idol that was worshipped by many of the Israelites during the period of the first temple, what Baal was a main idol and a main god, and in Babylon they kind of had this. They continued this tradition worshiping the god Baal. So you see clearly that Nebuchadnezzar didn't fully grasp the idea that the God of Judea is not just happens to be a more powerful God than the others, but is the only God, period, and the others were nothing. He didn't get that message because he still has his own God, Baal. And he also said he even doesn't understand what Daniel understands. He considers Daniel to be smart because Ruach Elohim Kadishin Bey, because the spirit of the holy gods are within him. So he still thinks that even Daniel is holy and smart because of the many gods, spirits that reside within him. Now, one can translate and say Ruach Elohim Kadishin is just meaning he has Holy Spirit in him, but it is in plural. It is said in plural, so I think it's pretty clearly obvious that this is the case. Belshazzar, and this is how I addressed Daniel, or his Babylonian name. I called him Belshazzar Rav Chartumaya. You are the greatest of all of the magicians, the Ano Yid'es, because I know the Ruach Elohim Kadishin Bach, that the spirit of the holy gods is within you, V'chol roz lo oneslach, and no secret is too confusing for you. Chazvei chalmi di chazesu fishrei amar. Tell me the meaning of my dream, of the vision that I saw, and explain to me what its interpretation is. V'chazvei reishi al mishkavi. And he continues to tell Daniel, and remember he's still writing this in a letter to the entire empire. In the visions of my mind, while I was lying on my bed, chazei haves, what I saw this following vision. Va'alu ilan begoy ara v'rumei sagi. A tree grew up from the ground, and it had a great height. It was a really very, very, very tall tree. Revoy lono tekif. The tree kept on growing, and it was strong and mighty with a big, strong stump. Uverumei yimtelishmaya, and its heights went all the way up to the heavens. And it was so tall that you could see it throughout the entire kingdom of Babylon. Ofye Shapir, its branches and leaves were beautiful in Beis Sagi, and it had a lot of fruit, all kinds of fruit growing. Umazon l'cholabe, there was enough fruit that grew from this tree that it was able to feed everyone. Techotohi, everyone who cholabe. Techotohi tatlel chevat bara. Beneath it, the animals were able to find shade. Uva'anpohi duron sipore shemaya, and in its branches the birds found places to nest and to rest. Uminei yitzin kol bisra, and from this tree all flesh, humans, animals, everyone gained sustenance from this tree. It doesn't take a genius to realize that this tree is Nebuchadnezzar's vision of himself. He thinks of himself as this powerful, mighty king who's high up to the heavens, and all of the countries under his dominion, which are represented by these animals and the birds and all people and everything, they all get fruit from him. Like he is the one who's giving them all of this wondrous bounty and wealth and so on. This is obviously how he thinks of himself. And then suddenly things started to change. This wonderful tree, but then I saw above this tree, while I was dreaming in my mind, va'alu ir v'kadish, and then an ear. An ear comes from the Hebrew word er, which is awake. So ear means a someone who stays awake and watches. The Kaddish, and it was holy, and meaning this is a reference and a way that we find often in Aramaic. The language ear is used to refer to an angel or a spiritual presence. This represents, of course, God himself. that min shemaya nochis, that came down from heaven, God being represented by an angel who is watching over this tree. So all of a sudden, you had this beautiful tree, and everything was coming from the tree as if I was the source of the sustenance of all these things. But then suddenly I saw that no, it's not me. There's a holiness, there's a God above who's coming down and watching over this tree. And Korei v'chayil, and he called out the message in strength. He called out like one calls out to an army. V'chein amar, and he said as follows: Godu ilana v'katzitzu anpoi, chop down this tree and cut off all of its branches. Ataru afyehu v'adaru inbei, strip off all of the leaves and the branches, and throw out all of its fruits. Throw the fruit out all over the field. Tunud chevata min tachtohi, get all the animals that are sitting in its shade, get them away, get them out of there. V'tzipurayim and anpohi, and all the birds are going to have to fly away from those branches where they were residing. The whole thing, he gave an order, God gave an order, or the messenger of God gave an order to chop it all down, get rid of it all. Biram, however, Ikar, this is still the angel talking, or God, or the angel delivering God's message. Ikar shar shoi bi arashavuku, leave the stump, the stump with the roots in the ground, leave it there. Uve esor di farzelu nechash, and wrap it in iron and bronze chains. Bidis divora uvital shemaya yitztaba, into the with its roots in the ground. And now this stump will get nourishment from the dew of the heavens, the imchev tachaloke ba'asav ara, and this stump will now wander together with the animals and eat grass together with the animals. So it's odd, because the vision started as a big tree, and then it talked about the stump that's stuck in the ground and stuck to the ground with this iron and bronze. But then, as we often see in dreams, things start to float and change. They're not necessarily logical progressions. So in the vision, the stump suddenly, it remained, but then the stump started becoming something else, becoming like an animal and wandering through the grass and eating grass just like the animals did, the animals that used to gain from the tree. So the stump used to be a grand tree that gave food to the animals and gave shade and sustenance to the animals, but now it has become one of the animals, just wandering through the fields eating grass. Livevei min anasha yishanon, let the literally livevei means the heart, but in those days the heart was considered the seat of thought, and the seat of emotion and thought and feelings took place in the heart. That's how they. So livevei min anasha yishanon means, may now that stump, which is obviously representing the king himself, is going to change from being a human being. He used to be the human being that gave all sustenance. Now it became like now the mind and the temperament of this person that used to be this grand tree now became a stump, and now it became and had the mind of an animal. And 7 periods of time, or cycles of time, presumably this means 7 years, or it could mean 7 seasons, which would be, I guess, if there's 4 seasons a year and 3/4, but presumably it means 7 years, Yachlefun Alohi, will pass, while this person who used to be the great king is now wandering in the fields like an animal. Big Zeirat Irin Pitkama. And this, remember, he's still writing this in the letter to everyone, and he's still describing his vision. And what was this vision? And the vision continued. This decree, or this sentence or this punishment, was decreed by the Irin, by the watchers, by these holy angels. Okay, Umeimar Kadishin She'elta, and the verdict, right, was spoken by the holy ones. So this could be Nebuchadnezzar's imagination of there being many gods, therefore saying that this was all of the gods had decreed this together. Remember, Nebuchadnezzar was not a monotheist. The way Daniel would look at this, the way a monotheist would look at this, is that this was decreed by God, and they may see in a vision angels being messengers to bring the message of God or to declare the word of God, but the word coming from God Himself. Ad divras di yinduun chaya di shalit ilaah b'malchut enasha. So that why is this? Why are we making this decree? So that everyone should know that it's not the tree, it's not the human being that gives sustenance or anything or power or anything to anyone, but it is the God Himself, the God of Most High, that runs the world, and He is the one who gives and decides who rules over the world. Ulamandi itzbei nina, and to whomever He desires, He will give power. Ushifal enashim yikim Allah, and He may decide even the lowliest of peoples, even the people that we might consider now to be barbarians. They may be the ones that are given rulership over others, if that is what God decides. This is verse 15. That the Nebuchadnezzar now describes finishes his description of his dream, and he says to Daniel, "This is the dream that I saw. Ana Malka Nebuchadnezzar. I, the king Nebuchadnezzar, this is the dream that I saw. Ba'ant, and you, Belteshazzar." I remember that's Daniel's name in Aramaic. Pishrei. Now you tell me what it means. Kol kavel di kol hakimei machusi lo yachlin pishrol hodotani. All of the smart and wise men of my kingdom have not been able to tell me what this dream means. V'ant kohel, but you, I know you're able. Di ruach Elohim kadishin bach, because the spirit of the holy gods are within you. Again, this is Nebuchadnezzar, the polytheist, talking to Daniel, as if he thinks Daniel is also a polytheist. Now, you can already imagine Nebuchadnezzar himself even said the meaning of the dream, which was within his dream. He said that the purpose of this decree is to demonstrate that God is the one that controls history, and that God is the one who decides who's up and who's down. But there's this other part of this dream. What's this 7 seasons? What's this time when I'm going to be like an animal? What does this all mean? What is this all talking about? And he's afraid. He's afraid that this means that something bad is going to happen to him. But he doesn't want to admit it to himself. He wants Daniel to be the one to tell him. I'm going to stop here. This is the end of the first half of chapter 4. We'll finish and we'll see how Daniel answers the question, the dream, and explains its meaning to Nebuchadnezzar the king when we study chapter 4a, when we study chapter 4b, second half, and complete this chapter. Thank you so much for joining in this study with us.